One of the things that you preach about is unity. Do you see us unifying for a common goal?
Well, we have to start somewhere. And I'm very hopeful because when I look at the awakening that's happening now, and it's happening at a very fast pace, while we are not there yet in terms of our ability to work together, our ability to believe in ourselves and in each other, I do believe we are on a trajectory to get there to the same extent that the awakening is happening so rapidly. I think when it happens, it's going to happen like a light bulb, bang. Because increasingly, people are becoming aware of the injustices. Quite often, for example, before I started talking about the Pact for the Continuation of Colonization, the French and what they're doing to West Africa, a lot of people didn't know. But after they heard it, they're like, what? How can this be? And so it awoke something in them. I feel the same feeling is going to happen where on an individual basis, people are going to say, I've got to do my part. They've got to come to that realization that alone, you cannot steer this ship. It's going to take all of us. And we have to keep preaching as elders to say, this is not about you. Think about your children, your grandchildren, and generations to come. Don't do it for you. Yes, if you can benefit from some of it, wonderful. But think about their future. If you have children, stop, take a look at them. Do you really want to leave this world for them like it is? I would hope the answer is no. So when that fire is burning within you, to say hell to the no. You know, there's not difference between my little girl who is of color and a white little girl. They're equally smart. So why should mine grow up in a world that is disadvantaging her for no good reason other than the ability to manufacture the gold, melanin?
Yesterday you mentioned about education, the mindset. How do we improve on that? How do we get to that level of consciousness that we are great, we are powerful?
We have to keep preaching the gospel of truth. Quite often people don't even know. I was shocked at the people that you would have thought they knew. I think yesterday I went to speak to a group of the Africa group at the World Bank. And you know, I spoke like I always do. I talked about the Berlin Conference. I talked about the Pact for the Continuation of Colonization. I talked about the injustices. And they asked all kinds of questions. It was wonderful. And as I was walking out, two African-born economists come to me and said, but Ambassador, we can't keep talking about the Berlin Conference. It's a thing of the past. Two African economists. I was shocked. I said, I just finished 2 hours. I answered every question, and you missed everything. I said, my sons, as long as we have a country called Togo, a country called Eswatini, a country called Malawi, Berlin Conference is alive and well. It's a policy that they spent 3 months strategizing on how to see to it that Africa and her children are forever defeated and dominated. I'm going to repeat that. 3 months of strategizing, 4 months of strategizing and making sure that they put together a policy to make sure Africa and her children are forever defeated and dominated. And that policy is still in place today. That is why we still have a country called Malawi, a country that can never survive on its own. That is why we are unable to see that obvious fact to say we cannot survive as these little-bitty African countries. That is why it is difficult for us to say, why can't we just say Africa for the Africans, no passports? It's a simple decision. The leaders just have to table it in their cabinets, done. Why is it so difficult for us to address the obvious? I was talking to the guy who used to work for, he was the ADB president, and he showed me a picture. He said, Ambassador, what do you see? I said, well, I see women who are selling potatoes and their wares. He says, what else do you see? I said, nothing else. He says, you see right there, that's a border. And I said, oh, a border where? He said, a border between two African countries. He said, you see the women on that side, when they run out of tomatoes, the people, citizens of that country, cannot cross over and buy tomatoes that they can see because they need a visa. Stupidity of the highest order. At the stroke of a pen, this could be dealt with. It's 2023. We can't seem to get it done. What is wrong with us? Berlin Conference. King Leopold and his instructions on how to subdue the Africans. The famous Willie Lynch. Willie Lynch letters on how to make a slave, how to condition a black person and make sure that they're forever subservient to the white men to perpetuity. We're still suffering from that. The legacy of slavery. Think of the many black people who are just automatically afraid of white people. Our leadership, you sit them in front of a white person, they start shaking. They're afraid to speak up. Why is that? Thanks to Leopold. Thanks to the legacy of slavery. Thanks to the Berlin Conference. How many people realize they're suffering from the legacy of slavery? They're suffering from colonization, the legacy of colonization. Until you realize that you're sick, how do you go to the doctor? I'm a medical doctor. If you don't come to me and complain about something that's ailing you, I can't help you. Yeah. So a lot of our people are not aware that not only are they sick at home, not only are they sick in a doctor's office, in the ward, in the hospital, they are in the intensive care and they don't even know it. And that is why Africa is not moving forward. Because the people who are on the boardroom table talking to the leaders of this world, they're suffering from the legacy of colonization. They're in the intensive care. So how then do we expect them to defend us and be our voice? They go to those tables mute. And that means 1.4 billion people are also mute. Our leadership must understand that too many of them are suffering from the legacy of slavery. They must have a conversation with the image in the mirror. Why am I afraid of those who don't look like me? How are they better? I was talking to my VP and he reminded me, he said, Ambassador, I found a new realization. He said, I heard about the gene segments. He said, the more gene segments a species has, the more superior, the more intelligent
they are.
That species is. And his realization was that black people have 9 segments, which is the highest gene segment. The second race, I won't mention their color, they don't look like us. Their gene segment is 6. And then 5.
Wow.
Blacks have the
9.
highest gene segment. Clearly more intelligent.
Yeah.
I can't help it, it is the facts. Just like they denied for far too long that life began in Africa. They wanted to make sure we got to prove that black people are inferior. And they went high and low, looked everywhere, turned every rock they could turn, and they still came back to the same place. Life, as we know it, began in Africa. Plain and simple.
Plain and simple.
They're the same ones who came up with the gene segment issue. But what they do is they don't want to bring it all out and make sure it's in our history books. But whose fault is that? We're still using the old colonial textbooks that intentionally eliminated facts that would have brought us up more empowered and proud as Africans. They put in there anything to demoralize us, everything to make us feel everything European is better and everything African was bad. Whose problem is it? We get ministers of education who have the freedom and the liberty to change the colonial textbooks, but they don't. Right here in Ghana, my daughter, I was shocked to realize not a single Kwame Nkrumah book is required reading in Ghana school system. Can you believe that? Not one. So who is stupid? With all the intelligence and all the gene segments, we behave in a very stupid way. What are our ministers of education doing? What stops them from changing the educational curriculum in Africa? Nothing, except they're still suffering from the legacy of colonization. Our ministers of finance, everybody knows it. We are paying for frivolous loans that go back, in some cases, to colonization. And yet they go to the World Bank every year, twice. Why aren't you challenging the World Bank to say, World Bank, we're coming together as African ministers of finance, and we're telling you, here is an open letter. We are no longer going to pay for these loans. These loans have been paid for 1,000 times over. Why are we getting 20% interest rate? We have never defaulted on our loans. Greece defaulted on its loans. Let's look at how much Greece is getting. What interest rate is Greece getting? We have never defaulted on our loans. Many African countries have never defaulted on their loans, and yet the rating agencies give them poor ratings so they can justify charging them high interest rates. It was all by design. When the Bretton Woods institutions were created after the European nations had destroyed themselves, like they always do. They're warriors people. All they know is to fight. After the Second World War, they destroyed themselves. So they looked to developing nations to see to it that their own success is going to be based on the failures of developing nations. They put a system in place to steal and rob in broad daylight the developing nations. The majority are in Africa. So yes, the Bretton Woods institutions, IMF, World Bank, their sheer survival is based on the failures of developing nations. They will never put in place a policy to benefit African nations. Now, here comes the kicker. You don't see anyone that doesn't look like you and I going to sell bad policies to African nations. They're sending you, my daughter, and my son over here. And they're training you to go and push these bad policies, policies that are detrimental to the development of African nations. They're the ones that are now being used as instruments of our own self-destruction. The damage is deep. When we get to that point, when we understand that we are part of somebody else's experiment that is won over and over and over, they continue to win. When are we going to wake up and say this insanity, like Albert Einstein said, doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result? When is the insanity going to end? When are we going to say enough is enough, stupidity no more? It's up to us.
It is.
We have ministers of trade. We know what the World Trade Organization is doing. Switzerland, a country that doesn't have a single acre of cocoa. It is the largest producer of cocoa products. Swiss coffee, Swiss chocolate, Swiss. You go hotels all over Africa. Swiss this, Swiss. It's our chocolate right here from Ghana.
It's true.
Why aren't we challenging them? World Trade Organization is giving it a blind eye. They know it. Look at the teas and coffees out of East Africa. The best.
The best.
They go to Europe, they're renamed. Are you with me?
Yep.
We know it's happening. Why aren't they go to WTO and say, enough is enough, stop this BS? You wouldn't want it done to your country. Why are you doing it to us? Simple questions that must be asked and that demand answers. But we don't, because we get scared.
Why are we scared?
No.
Why are we scared though?
Why are we scared? Why are we scared? What are we afraid of? We are abused. I sat in meetings where they were yelling at ambassadors. And you said to yourself, what gives? What gives you the right? These ministers didn't come thousands of miles to the faraway land to be yelled at, to be demeaned. And we say nothing. When we get to that point, when we are armed with facts and we are empowered and we can stand up and say enough is enough. Now that's when Africa is going to discover her voice. That's when Africa is going to begin to change. And for us to get to that point, we're going to have to keep preaching the gospel of truth and nothing but the truth. The gospel of facts. Truth and facts, two constants that never change. Let's give the world an overdose of our truth. Let's give the world an overdose of our facts. And when we saturate each and every black person, starting with our children, through our educational system, when everybody is full of truth and we have the courage to say, not today, not tomorrow, not next week, not next month, not next year, not the next decade, not the next century. The time is up. Game is over. Like we would say in Botswana, ikete, that means time up. Done. Get out. If you don't like how we do things in Africa, there's the door. There's always your Europe. Yeah. There's always your Europe. We have our Africa. Leave us alone with our Africa. Go to your Europe. And we're okay with that. When we can stand up and tell them the door, show them the door, and tell them we can, then and only then can Africa change.
Do you think that it's important for African countries to attend UN General Assembly?
Absolutely not.
Why not?
Totally useless. Why are they going there for? The largest voting bloc at the United Nations does not have a voice, does not have a seat at the table. They go there to vote on other people's issues, other countries' issues. They don't vote on their own issues. So why are we there? When Africans can come together and say, United Nations Secretary Guterres, we are not coming until we are at the table. We are the largest voting bloc. We are not coming. We should be number 6. We should be the 6th member of the UN Security Council. Short of that, keep your thing. You know, it took a month to put together United Nations. It was for them. The biggest abusers of human rights, Britain, France, and the United States. And then, of course, you got Russia and China.
5.
And they're supposed to be the watchdogs for human rights violations. The biggest perpetrators of human rights are the 5 members. Hello. And why haven't the Africans come together and says, enough is enough? We're not coming. This is not for us.
But we've got the African Union.
Yes.
How comes we're not doing something together?
That's a toothless bulldog. That's another entity.
My goodness.
It's a very sad story. You know, when you look at the history of the African Union, our Pan-African fathers, when they met in 1963, the ideas that they had, the vibrance that Africa was, what they went to Addis Ababa, Ethiopia to accomplish, NATO was in full force. Brown envelopes passed. They were divided, the Casablanca group, Ghana, Guinea, Mali, Morocco, Algeria, Egypt, Tunisia. They said Africa for the Africans at home and abroad, and African Union now. Unfortunately, the Monrovia group, who were the majority, they said, no, let's kind of go slow on this unity thing. Let's go slow. Well, we've been going slow ever since. If the Kwame Nkrumahs of that time had succeeded, if the Casablanca group had succeeded at accomplishing what they went to Addis Ababa to do, Africa would be in a very different place. They talked about a single currency, a single monetary policy, a single military, a single trade policy. None of that. We only managed to accomplish one 3 years ago, the African Continental Free Trade Area. And even that, we are now handing Africa to the Western world, to the Eastern world, on a silver platter. We don't have the money to compete on those contracts. So where are the contracts going? They're going to go to the Middle Easterners. They're going to go to the Europeans. They're going to go to the Chinese. They're going to go to the Indians.
But we have money on the continent.
If we can just come together and pull our funds together. And I like to challenge the diaspora. If we were to take 5 million diaspora who commit to $100 a month for 5 years, you know how much money that is? And then our own natural resources, look at what Burkina Faso, rather Niger has done. To say that I'm going to start with my uranium. And that France, I'm no longer going to sell you my uranium for 80 cents. It's going to be 200 euros per kilo moving forward.
Yeah.
Right there,
New bargain.
Niger
Yeah.
kept almost 300 billion a year that was going to France and funding French education, French healthcare. That alone, one mineral,
Yep.
would completely change the economy of Burkina Faso, of Niger overnight. Now let's take all the other minerals. Burkina Faso is doing it. They started with their gold. When are we going to have leadership with enough balls to do what's right? To do what any other man would do? Dude, you wouldn't want me doing that in your country. Why would you want to do it in my country? Get out. What's right is right. What is fair is fair. We are not asking the world to do what they wouldn't want done unto them. We're simply asking the world to treat Africa fairly. We're simply asking the world to do unto us as they want done unto them.
Do you see in the future a Kwame Nkrumah coming back, a Nelson Mandela? Do you see the youth? Do you see anybody right now? Do you see that we can have those type of people back?
As mothers, as elders, we have to groom them.
Okay.
We raise them with knowledge. We start with the educational system that really tells them the truth. That's what's missing. Our textbooks are pitiful. We still want our children to learn about the petals on a flower. You know? How many legs does a caterpillar have? It's a joke, you know. How long is the Nile River? Okay, fine, you need to know how long it is. But I want to know, what can I do with the Nile River that can make my life better? The farming that can come out of the Nile River, the irrigation systems, the fishing that can come out of the Nile River, the electricity that can come out of the Nile River. Challenge me to think, look at what's around me and how can I use it to make me better, to make my life better. But no, they stop with, how long is the river now? How long is the river Congo? How long is, and what the hell am I going to do with the mileage? Are you with me? It shows up in exam questions.
It's true.
Stupidity of the highest order, man. And when are we going to stop it? And we got these intelligent professors who think they're actually teaching. Come on now. Look at mining. The continent with the most minerals. We don't have many. I think it's only recently that some universities are beginning to teach mining methods. But did you learn about mining when you went to school? No. But white kids who don't have gold mines, they are learning about gold mining in Europe so they could come here and mine what belongs to you. My daughter, let me tell you, it saddens me sometimes. I just sit back and think, what is wrong with us? We know the truth, but we're just not doing the right thing. It's sickening. It's got to change. And if our older people cannot do it, they need to move out of the way. Let the younger people who get it take over. Because this insanity cannot go on. It has to stop.
Why can't we just say Africa for Africans, no passport? As simple as that. It's easy to table it in front of African Union and make it a reality. So many African leaders like Kwame Nkrumah, Muammar Gaddafi, and others have preached about the unity of Africa. They know the power that Africa can exercise at the world stage if they speak with one voice. Other countries have done it, like Europe through the European Union and America through the United States of America. And they are enjoying the benefit of speaking with one voice and influencing decision at the world stage. At least Africa can start from somewhere, like through the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, to introduce a visa-free Africa, that Africans should be allowed to move in Africa visa-free without a passport. President Paul Kagame of Rwanda is the perfect example, as Africans are allowed to visit Rwanda without a visa, and other African countries need to follow that example. In fact, that should be a priority of African Union and a top agenda on their list that need to be implemented now, for the time is now. Imagine the business opportunities, tourism opportunities that we can enjoy as Africans if Africa is visa-free for all Africans, and you need only your passport to enter into any country in Africa with no immigration officer asking you for a visa. The cultural exchange we can enjoy as Africans will be huge, with our rich cultural diversity, and most importantly, we are going to know our brothers and sisters from the other parts of Africa. Africa is a rich continent full of natural resources, and without Africa being able to move in Africa visa-free, it will be difficult for us to exploit these resources, therefore giving the upper hand to the Europeans, Chinese, and Americans to exploit our natural resources for their own benefit and even determine the price for us, since the Africans don't have access to that resources due to limitation of movement in the name of visa in Africa. For Africa Continental Free Trade Area, which is Africa Vision 2063, to be fully effective, Africa needs to be visa-free for all Africans so that people and goods can move freely. Also, get to understand each other, discover our potentials, and develop together as Africans. Unity is our strength. United and powerful Africa. Africa, wake up. Africa, rise up. Africa without borders. Africa Continental Free Trade Area. The time is now. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.